So you're sitting on the grid in Jeddah as a Ferrari Formula One driver. What's going through your mind at that moment when you're waiting for the lights to go out?
This is real, this is happening, and this is your chance.
The winner of the feature, Ollie Bearman, does the double in Baku.
You know, I have the belief in myself that I can perform at a very high level, so the emotion sometimes reminds me how much I want this, and I think if the lows weren't part of it, it means you don't care enough and you're not committed enough.
And for people who are excited about you racing in Formula One for Haas next season, what would you like to tell them about your feelings about that season? What do you want out of that season?
This episode is supported by Huel.
How's it going?
Good. It's nice to be here. This is one of the few podcasts that I've actually listened to in my life, because it's not really something I do often, but I find a lot of interest in this podcast. You speak to a lot of interesting athletes and successful people, and you know, especially the ones you did with Fernando, with Toto, with Günther. I really learned a lot from them, so it's nice to be on here myself.
It's nice to have you. Yeah, look, we've got a good Formula One heritage, I guess, on high performance. And I suppose it's easy for people to talk about achieving great things, winning world titles, winning championships. That is high performance. But I think the reason why I was so keen to talk to you is that what you went through in Saudi Arabia, and now officially a Formula One driver at 19 years of age, is, in my mind, high performance. And I think it's people like you that inspire the next generation to really follow their dreams. And that in itself is something special. So when I ask you the question, what is high performance? What do you think of?
For me, high performance in the field that we're in racing, it's about making decisions quickly, the correct decisions quickly. You know, where we have to make a lot of these split-second decisions about overtaking, tyre strategy, race strategy, and making the right one is you know, high performance, and I think that's what separates the talented drivers from the successful drivers.
So what would you share with people then about how you make really quick decisions and trust in your decision?
I think a lot of it comes from experience, because when I was at the beginning of my career in F4 and in Formula 3, I did find myself making the wrong ones pretty often. So it's definitely a thing of experience, but trusting your gut is something that I tend to go with. Things like racecraft and stuff like that, it's also a difficult part. And yeah, it tends to just go right. You have to go, you know, not be second guessing yourself and be unsure. You have to be really, really sure with your decision. And that's something that I've improved with experience. But, you know, you see the more experienced guys in F1, they tend to be, you know, getting it right more often than not.
Yeah. I love how you talk about experience at 19 years of age, but the truth is you have, because you've been racing for a long time, and finally it has happened. You are officially a Formula One driver. You're going to be racing for Haas from the start of the 2025 season. So when I say you've made it, you have a seat at the top table, how do you feel?
Yeah, you know, it's been a long time coming, and for any team to put their trust in you, it's a proud feeling, and especially in my position being a rookie with the climate of F1 at the moment. You know, this year we don't have any rookies in the championship, and for them to have that trust in me, I have to first of all thank them massively, because it can't be easy. It's a bit of a dive into the unknown for Io and Jean. So, you know, the fact that they gave me their trust, it gives me a lot of confidence, because they've seen something clearly, and I hope that I can continue to show that. And you know, it's been a bit of a long journey now with Haas, because I first met them in Qatar last year. I had 2 free practices in Mexico. I had the postseason young driver test in Abu Dhabi. And, you know, now we're continuing our journey into 2025 and beyond. So I've just been amazed by the atmosphere within the team, how easily they brought me in. I've really loved every moment, and I hope that it's a great relationship together, because so far it's been like that. So I hope it continues in that way.
I love that. And look, Gene Haas is like one of the legendary figures of global motorsport. Have you ever had a chance to chat to him on the phone or in person? How's he been?
So I met him for the first time in Austria, and we had about an hour conversation just talking about motorsport and the technical side of things, which he loves. And I love that because he was actually, I mean, he has a lot more knowledge than me on that side of things. And it's great to see how much passion he has as well.
Did he give you a bit of advice?
He, of course, gave me the standard advice, which is, build it up and
don't put it in the wall.
Don't put it in the wall, of course. But, I think we have the same goal together. We have really high ambitions, both me and the team. So I'm really excited to start the partnership together.
Right. And look, both of us have seen cultures in Formula One teams over the years that haven't been great for young drivers. The pressure has just simply been too much for them to excel. How would you describe the culture in that team? Because they need to push you as hard as they physically can, but also make you feel protected and looked after in your rookie season. Yeah,
they need to push me, but also by the same token, I like I said, I kind of push myself a lot. So, it's like that on one side of things. On the other side, I feel like I know all of the people, the mechanics, the staff on a personal level a bit more, having spent so many races with them now. And I feel like, it's not just a professional relationship, but also a bit more personal, which is really important. And, if I just turned up for the preseason test in Bahrain next year, it wouldn't be like that. So I'm glad that I've built up a bit of a rapport with these guys. And, the people that I will be working with have a lot of experience within F1 and they can impart a lot of knowledge onto me. So I find that really useful. And, Io, the new team principal, he's had a great, effect on Haas, and they're in a great point at the moment. They're scoring points on regular occasions, just come off the back of a P6 in Silverstone, which is a really impressive result. So they're in a great spot, and I can't wait to continue that with them.
I've got some photos here actually, and I wonder what this kid would make of it. So you started racing at 6, right?
Yeah.
How old are you in this photo? With trophies already, by the way.
This was around 2015, so this was around 9 or 10 years old. So a few years into the journey. I remember that race. It was at Bugmore Park.
Was it? Which is one of the famous karting tracks in the UK.
One of my locals. It's my closest track. So I always seem to get on well there. I remember my first race there. I was still a novice, and the novices in karting have a different color numbers to the rest. So I have black and white numbers, and usually the novices, they start at the back of the grid because generally, the less experienced guys are quite a lot slower. But for this specific race, the novices were allowed to qualify and start where they qualified, and I happened to qualify 6th. And I remember how nervous I was starting that race because I was up amongst it with these guys who were 4 or 5 years older than me. And I was a little 8-year-old, looking at these big kids. And I was starting P6 in this race as a novice against the British Championship drivers. Bugmore Park, I have some fond memories there.
So there's another photo of you, a little bit older there.
This was 2018, I think. It took me a while to grow up. I had a baby face until a couple of years ago. So
you look pretty steady there.
This was I finished 2nd in Italy, in Castelletto, and that was on the way to winning the European Championship in junior. So that was a good season for me, but you see, I don't look too happy there, finishing 2nd.
And talking of baby faces, that one's purely just to embarrass you. You're probably about 2 years or 3 years old. I don't know how old you are there.
Yeah, I don't know either, but that's a cute photo.
Was this kid dreaming of Formula One?
This kid had a lot of model cars. This kid could tell you every single car that drove past him on the road. So he was definitely a petrol head. I do remember watching all the F1 races. And of course, dreaming to be there. And it's a very proud moment that I finally get to say that I'll be one of those 20.
So let's break down for people who see Formula One as this kind of mysterious world where they don't really know what goes on, right? How and when did the moment come where you actually knew that you were going to be a Formula One driver? Did you know that less than half of Brits eat breakfast every day of the week? I mean, that's amazing. But why? Well, it's because we're all time poor, especially in the mornings. So we compromise. My fix is Huel's nutritionally complete high-protein shake, a complete meal in a bottle that slots perfectly into my life. Head to the link in the description for a free t-shirt on your first order with Huel. How can you resist that?
I mean, I knew that it was in the realms of being a possibility when I joined the Ferrari Driver Academy. That gave me a clear path to the top.
When was that?
So that was at the end of 2021. I was halfway through my F4 campaign that year, my second one, and the one where I won 2 championships. I was the first person to do so. And actually my teammate Kimi did it next year, so the year after. So we've always been kind of doing that. But I guess we'll get into that a bit later. So yeah, we got the call from Ferrari. Actually, I had COVID at the time when they called me, so I was at a really low point, and that was a nice news that they were interested, and they invited me to come to Italy to Maranello to have an assessment. And yeah, we decided pretty quickly that we should work together and start something. And after that, I went into F3, and having an academy behind me, Ferrari as well, it's giving a clear path to the top. Until I joined an academy, it was a dream. And then once I did so, it was a dream with a bit of backing, with a bit of reality sprinkled in there as well. So that was when it became a possibility. Of course, until you get in an F1 car and perform, it's never, you're never sure. But I knew after my first test, which went pretty well in Fiorano, I knew that the car suited me and that I had a good performance. I did some free practices at the back end of last year, which went well. So that was where it became, close. And Jeddah, of course, happened.
Should we talk then about Jeddah and that weekend? Let's rewind the clock to the moment where it's feeling like a normal weekend for you. So you race in Formula 2, which is the big support race for Formula 1. So you follow a lot of the Formula 1 races, but the two are quite separate. Formula 1 happens in one part of the circuit with their own paddock and their own media areas. You're in another part of the paddock. When did you first get this inkling that something was going on and it might impact your race weekend?
Yeah, so just for a bit of backstory, we came off the back of a really difficult weekend in Bahrain in Formula 2. And we turned up in Jeddah with really mixed expectations. We really struggled in Bahrain, honestly. 0 points as a team and really struggling for pace. We turned up in Jeddah and I put the car on pole in qualifying. So that was just a great feeling for the whole team. We'd been really struggling, and that felt like such a necessary result. So, the weekend started well. But even before that, I knew that Carlos was not feeling great, but I continued focusing on Formula 2 and watching FP like I normally would. I spoke briefly with his trainer because he was my trainer last year, and more out of care for Carlos because Jeddah is a really difficult track and very physical on the body, and it came about. I forget which day because this was a strange weekend because everything was moved. Yeah. So it was qualifying day. I was having lunch, preparing for a sprint race where I was starting P10 since the grid was reversed.
That would have been Thursday.
That would have been Thursday, yeah. And no, I'm not sure. Anyway.
Yeah, because then Friday was was F1 quali. Saturday was the F1 race.
Yeah, so it would have been Friday then, actually, because
right, early on Friday then.
F1 qualifying day. Yeah, so because everything is quite late, I was having lunch. Yeah. Sitting with Chris and the rest of my little personal team, and I saw the call on Chris's phone from Fred Vasseur, and normally, on a race weekend, it doesn't really spell good news when Fred calls. I knew he wasn't going to call me to say good luck for the race, and. Yeah, I could see Chris's face when he picked up the phone, and it was a bit, it was a specific facial expression.
So what are you thinking then at that point?
I put 2 and 2 together. I knew that Carlos wasn't feeling great, and I could feel, a bit of excitement. Chris's phone actually wasn't working correctly, so I called Fred afterwards, and he broke the news to me. I think I panicked a bit because he was telling me to calm down and that. Just to head to the track and we can start. I don't remember it specifically because honestly the whole 48 hours was such a blur, but it was words to the effect of, "You're going to be racing for Ferrari this weekend. You're going to sub in for Carlos."
You know what, though, just to stop you, sorry. When someone goes, "You're going to be racing for us this weekend," that's one thing. When you're going to be racing for Ferrari this weekend, I mean, Lewis Hamilton has spent his entire career waiting for the moment to get into that red car. It's like the most famous car on the grid, and suddenly you've gone from Ollie Bearman, who's having his lunch thinking about an F2 race, to suddenly you're driving for Ferrari. I mean, man, you must have almost fell off your chair.
It was crazy, and I think he could tell the panic in my voice and how crazy I went. I looked across at my dad, and I think he knew from my face as well. We got straight in the car, and I was so nervous, but walking into the paddock...
So when did the excitement turn into...
It was pretty much instant. It was excitement for the phone call, and then I was thinking of all the eventualities, the fact that I would throw away this F2 weekend that was starting on pole, that I had missed the first 2 practice sessions. I knew it was going to be a steep hill to climb, and a tall order, but yeah, I headed into the paddock, and the news hadn't broke yet. I was walking in standard, no one took any notice of me. I was just an F2 driver going in for lunch or something with Ferrari. I remember I sat down with Fred in his office, and he gave me the lowdown, the debrief, or the pre-brief, should I say.
And what did he tell you at that point that he thought was important for you to know?
I think it was just to manage my expectations, to make me understand that he wasn't expecting fantastic things. And I think that's the kind of the gist I got from everyone who I spoke to within Ferrari. They wanted to make sure that I built everything up step by step, didn't try to be a hero. Because I think in those situations you can sometimes do yourself a bit more harm than you can good. If I went out there in free practice or qualifying and it's like the car in the wall, it wouldn't have been a good look. So yeah, I had the call or the radio message from the team before every session, to build it up step by step and take it easy. Which on one hand, that was also something in the front of my mind, but when you're getting told don't crash, it's also,
it puts one thing in your head, doesn't it?
I wasn't thinking about crashing until they say it, so it's a tough thing, but it went well in the end, and I did exactly what they said. I built it up, and as much as they told me they weren't expecting anything, I knew that everyone was watching, and I knew that this could be a really important 48 hours in my career. The pressure was on.
You've had the call, you've gone and met with Fred. Obviously, then it's sitting in a Ferrari for the first time over a race weekend. And I think it's really important we have to explain to people that this is Carlos Sainz's car. It's set up for Carlos, it's designed for Carlos. It's even got Carlos's number and name on the side of it. So can you explain, for those that aren't too familiar with Formula 1, what are the changes that have to happen to that car for it to be set up for you pretty quickly? Yeah,
so of course, the first thing is the seat. I had a seat ready because I'd already done some testing with the 2022 car, which has the same, kind of outline and everything. So my seat was ready, and my seat came to every race, since I'm doing the reserve role. So luckily there was no, bodge jobs required there. I already had something that fit me more or less well. Pedals, of course, I'm not the same height as Carlos, and that needed moving. Steering wheel, I requested that it was changed just because I tend to use Charles's on the sim. That's not because I prefer it, but just because the first time I used the sim, I used Charles's, and I just, got used to using that. So yeah, a few button differences and a few different placement of things, and I found myself a lot of times changing the brake balance instead of opening the DRS because those buttons are swapped compared to Charles's steering wheel. And that's it really. I jumped in the car. I had to do the jump out test for the FIA.
What's that?
That's basically that you can get out the car, put the steering wheel back on, which I'm not sure why, because I think in a situation I wouldn't be putting the steering wheel back on. But yeah, they need to make sure that you can get out the car safely and in a specific required time. But I remember that there was 50 cameras outside, shooting me doing that, and I was so nervous to fail that because you get one shot and that's it. But yeah, that was obviously after the news broke, because I couldn't be sitting in the Ferrari before it was confirmed that I was going to race it. So that was when I really started to feel the pressure. When I walked out of the hospitality into the garage, and that was, I looked out the window before I walked out, and that was just a crowd of cameras. And that was when I realized, this is real, this is happening, and this is your chance. That's when it became a reality, I think.
Could you explain how you dealt with that mentally, to suddenly see not just the pressure of driving a car? You're a racing driver. That's kind of what you've prepared yourself to do all your life. But what you haven't prepared yourself to do is to have 100 photographers and 1 million TV cameras and microphones and everything else that comes with it. So what did you go through to settle that part of it?
Yeah, F1 is massively more in terms of media attention and everything like that. Formula 2, you're not really watched that closely by the media, and when you get to F1, that's something that is exponentially bigger. And I found that out in Jeddah. That there's nothing going on in Formula 2. You can, there's not much going on compared to getting into F1 and seeing this amount of cameras. I was quite shocked, honestly, and it was a bit tough.
In what way?
Just because I knew that the eyes were on me. This was the biggest news of the day, and I knew that, an 18-year-old making his debut with Ferrari, I knew that the pressure was on, and people were watching me, and that it would be a really important few laps. So yeah, it made it really tough. I think the positive part was that I was told only hours before it happened. I didn't have time to overthink it and get nervous, because I was straight to work. I was, catching up on what I missed out in the first 3 practice sessions. I was learning procedures about the car, which I didn't know yet. So that helped me to kind of keep my mind occupied and not focusing on the pressure and the attention and everything like that. But I do remember trying to sleep before race day. It took a bit longer than normal.
I bet it did. Before we get to race day, we'll talk about qualifying and free practice. So you had 1 hour behind the wheel of that car to prepare for a qualifying session. Would you give us an insight into the kind of the mental overwhelm, if you like? Because there's actually 1 million things in that Formula 1 car that you've never experienced, right?
Yeah, exactly. They're much more complex than what I'm used to in Formula 2. And despite the fact that I've done quite a lot of hours in the simulator, which definitely prepared me as well as possible, doing it in a race situation or doing it when you're physically on track, the stakes are a bit high. If you make a mistake in the simulator, you reset and you go again. You don't quite have that luxury on track. So yeah, there was a lot going on, and that free practice session I had to learn everything preparing for quali in 1 hour. And just to put it into perspective, my first push lap of that session was 14 seconds faster than my pole position in F2 the day before. So everything comes at you a lot quicker.
And how did that feel physically, to be 14 seconds quicker than the best time you could do in the car you're used to driving?
It's something quite special. I knew after a few laps in free practice that it was going to be a physical race, physical qualifying and a physical race, because Jeddah is one of the most physical tracks on the calendar. And yeah, I knew that I would struggle after 1 or 2 laps in FP3. So
with what?
The neck, but even the legs moving around, you have to be really strong with the core, with the back. It's something that, I'm F2 fit, and I don't find F2 that challenging, but I was an F1 fit, and I probably still aren't. I'm probably still not, sorry. But yeah, it's a big step and something I still need to get used to. But aside from the physical aspect, the speed at which you arrive at the corners, every corner is 20-30 kph faster, and the apex speed is also that delta higher as well. So it's something to get used to. Just how sharp and pointy the car is because of the extra downforce. That was something that impressed me. And after a few laps, I realized that it's going to be difficult to get the confidence to push this thing to the limit, because pushing the F1 car to the limit, especially in a track like Jeddah, I feel like it's all in the mind. It's how much risk you're prepared to take. It's how much you're willing to put on the line in a track like Jeddah, especially. So that was what I had to come to terms with, and what I had to try and get comfortable with in 1 hour.
I'd really love you to explain how you managed to do that, because the truth is that you qualified really well. I know you described it as messy, and even now I can see your face. You're like, oh, it wasn't a great qualifying. Ollie, you had 1 hour and total mental overwhelm. How many buttons would there be on a Formula One steering wheel? Roughly.
Yeah, 15, 20, something like this. But there's many combinations that you can make an infinite amount of changes on the car. So that's... also, there's a lot of things you can do during the lap to optimize the car, which is not what I'm used to. I mean, in Formula 2, you optimize the car with your driving, and if you have a problem in a specific corner, you change the way you approach the corner. Whereas in Formula 1, you change the way that the car is set up per corner. So this is something that I didn't really use and know how to maximize. But it's just stuff like this. It's just so many new things that I had to get used to. That's why, at the time I was very disappointed with, just missing out on Q3 to a mistake. But I think when I look back and in hindsight put things into perspective, I'm pretty proud of what I managed to achieve.
Because there must have been a moment where you became comfortable pushing that car. Because I remember watching qualifying and there was a couple of moments where I thought, this guy's going to end up in the wall. Did you fear that moment?
I hit the wall 3 times in qualifying. And after the second time, I was like, okay, let's calm it down a bit. But on the other hand, that's the precision you need in F1. You can't leave anything on the table. And, even looking back, I did leave too much on the table because I missed out on Q3 by that little chunk. If you look at my first lap in Q1, I had a massive snap and all of that confidence that I built up through FP1 and sorry, FP3. It was FP1 for me,
yeah.
But
no FP1 for you or FP2. So that moment in the car, and just to explain a snap for people that don't understand, it's where the back of the car steps
an
out.
oversteer moment that in F1, those are pretty scary. In Formula 2, you can get used to the car moving around, but when you have more downforce and those moments, they're a bit more sudden and a bit more, the sudden and more and violent, exactly. And that's what it is, because I was building up step by step in FP3, and on my last lap I was really confident with the car. So I go out in qualifying, the track's 20, 30 degrees cooler because it was in the night. The fuel loads are much lighter, new set of soft tires, and the track was getting better every lap as well. So I go out there and drive to what I think would be more or less the limit, and I have an oversteer and lose a bit of time. But more importantly, my confidence, which was at 9 out of 10, is back to a 6. Because having this moment, it's really tough because, I caught it, but maybe next time I won't. So that's the importance of building up step by step. And I kind of went with my gut and thought that this would be the grip level, and I overstepped it, and then I'm back to where I was 5 laps ago. It's like I restart. So that's why I felt like it was a messy session, because I was always having to, I wasn't building up step by step. I was having to make pretty large jumps because of these little moments, but also in search of the limit, you have to have these little moments of going over the limit to find actually where the limit is. So it's a tough compromise.
Did you allow yourself in the car in qualifying any moment of, I'm driving a Formula One car here in a qualifying session? A couple of hours ago, I was just having lunch with my team and it was a normal day. Did that ever come into your head during the session?
I didn't have time to. The focus of, between runs, you're looking at the data, you're trying to improve, where I was losing time to Charles. And between laps, you're looking at, the tire temperatures, trying to cool them down correctly, trying to stay out of the way of traffic, because that is impressive in F1. The cars arrive a lot quicker than they do in F2. And yeah, traffic management is something that just takes up your whole cooldown lap. Because, you do a push lap, then you have to charge the battery and cool the tires down. But on the top of doing that, you have to stay out of the way of everyone. And when they're arriving at 300 kph, I didn't have any time to think about anything else than, getting out the way, charging the battery, cooling the tires, and getting ready for the next lap. There was no time to enjoy it. I had a bit of time to do so in the race when things were a bit more settled down. But we'll get onto that.
So I loved the fact that you got out of the car and said it was messy. Because I think it kind of showed in many ways to Ferrari and the rest of the paddock that you weren't there just for a good time, right? You were there as a serious racing driver that wanted to be the best that you could be. Do you really now, on reflection, think that you did anything other than an incredible job in that qualifying session?
I mean, I look at a specific moment, which was my penultimate lap in Q2, where I made a mistake. I ran a bit wide and lost a decent chunk of time on the exit all the way down the straight, and that was ultimately what didn't get me through into Q3. And I really would have liked to keep doing laps because, with more, every lap I was doing at that stage, I was almost doubling my experience. So I knew that if I got to Q3, I would have been able to clean up my lap a bit and tidy everything up. And I think that if it wasn't a messy session, I wouldn't have been on the limit, because I had to explore the limits and make a few mistakes to get everything out of it. But yeah, on reflection, I just have that moment where I ran wide. I threw a load of sparks out the back, and that was ultimately why I didn't get into Q3. That's the only thing, but I'm not that hard on myself anymore. In the moment, with the heat, in the heat of the moment, I of course was a bit disappointed. But now looking back, I'm not too sad. But I think if I got into Q3, I think I could have done a decent job. Because like I said, I was gaining experience lap by lap. So yeah, hopefully I have another chance of doing that one day.
One day. I'm always interested when you get these big moments in life, right? Who's kind to you? Like, who puts their arm around you? So let's talk about Fred Vasseur first. What was he like with you? He's the team boss, right, at Ferrari. How did he approach you after that qualifying session?
You need to hear this, okay? Your gut matters. It's a vital building block to health. Now, you might not know that 70% of your immune system is in your gut. I didn't know that. And 95% of serotonin, which is the feel-good chemical, is created in your gut. And if there's one thing we need more of, it's a feel-good chemical, right? That's why when it came to choosing a probiotic, I had to know it was proven and that I could fully trust it. And this is it. Biotic by Heights, specifically formulated to give you everything you need for your gut, your mind, and your immune system. I take it every day. And the difference for me is real. And you could trust me, fine, cool. Or you could trust the tens of thousands of high performers and elite athletes that rely on Biotic every day. So join tens of thousands of high performers and try Heights with an exclusive 20% off your first month only with this podcast. Go to heights.com/HP or enter the code HP20 at checkout. You'll love it.
Fred was, first of all, he's been through it all, right? He's been with the junior drivers in F3 and F2, so I think that was mainly the reason that he called on me in the first place, because he appreciates the talent in F2, which maybe some other, top guys don't. And yeah, I do remember after quali, he said that I had a few touches with the wall, and he was like, no more of those. And in qualifying, when you put the car on the limit, you take a bit more risk. But Fred guided me through really well, and he kept me grounded, and made me refocus on taking things step by step. I remember every time I got into the car, each session he was the first one on the radio telling me to take it easy and build it up. And like I said, that was really important that he did that, because it wasn't on my mind, and for better or for worse. But it's nice to have it there, and he helped me through a lot.
And people might not know that the nickname of Formula One, for those inside it, is the Piranha Club, right? Because people can attack each other at any given moment. What was Charles Leclerc like with you?
He was super helpful. Yeah. I think he understood the difficulty of the position I was in, and he was helping me through the sessions, especially before qualifying. And even I think he could tell I was a little bit nervous. And
so the first time that you see him after you've had the news, and he's obviously been given the news as well, what did he come over and say?
I struggle to remember. First of all, I think he said congratulations, and of course happy for me. But the thing I remember that he helped me with was, before the race, we sat down with him and also Fred, and he was helping me a little bit, because I hadn't done any long runs, so I hadn't done more than like 2 pushes in a row before doing the race. So it's a bit of a different scenario driving in the race versus the qualifying, and he gave me a bit of insight about the tire behavior and stuff like that, stuff that I hadn't experienced yet. And it's a little detail, but it's super helpful, and it's something that I didn't get to experience in my one free practice session. So these small little tips and insights were priceless for me in the situation I was in.
It's a mark, though, of him as a man as well, that he made sure he took the time. Because, the first person you want to beat in Formula One is your teammate, right? It is a rivalry as well as being in the same team. I think it's a mark of him that he made sure he took the time to offer you as much advice as you needed.
Yeah, I've always really been a big fan of Charles. I was teammates with Arthur, his brother in F3, and naturally we were all supporting Charles in that year. And yeah, he's been performing really, really well. And that weekend, I knew him a little bit before. We'd met a few times, but that weekend I really kind of saw what type of a person he was. I gained a lot of respect for him because, there was no obligation to do something like this. And yeah, I really appreciated it. And it seemed like a little, word here and there for him, but for me it meant a lot. And I really appreciated it.
Nice. And what about Carlos Sainz? Because obviously he's got other things on his mind. The reason why he's not racing is because he's having appendix operation, right?
Yeah. First of all, I have to say that it wasn't the circumstances that I wanted to make my F1 debut, and I know Carlos was would have preferred to be on track himself. But when an opportunity like this comes, you have to be ready, and I was. Carlos was there on race day in the garage, standing with the engineers, and actually I spoke to him after the race, and he was saying, a few things that the engineers wanted me to say, wanted to say to me. He was telling them not to because it would have been a bit of an overload of info. But also during the race, he was seeing some things that were happening, looking at my driving and giving some pointers, what to change on my driving and what to change on the car setup itself.
Right? So he was watching the race, and then what he was telling the engineers to give you that advice, or he was coming on the radio?
He was telling them what to tell me, basically. So yeah, that was pretty nice. And, he's been in that situation and he knows what the driver wants. So I found that really useful.
And what did he say to you before the race started?
First of all, he sent me a message after the qualifying to say, first of all, it's a tough track and good job because it's a bit of a headache in qualifying, specifically with the tyres in Jeddah. It's quite tough to have them ready for the whole lap and prepare them, and that's something I missed out on as well. I didn't really know how to prepare the tyres, so he said, just get through the first lap pretty cleanly or words to that effect, and I wished him the best for his surgery. And yeah, it was great to see that he came back to the circuit the next day. He'd been through a lot, so that was really cool.
It's nice. And what advice did he offer you before the race started?
Honestly, not much. Before the race, I was mainly speaking with the engineers from my side or his side of the garage. I spoke briefly with Jock Clear, who's leading the FDA, and he's actually Charles's driver coach, and he offered me quite a decent amount of insight. Even Marc Genet, who works for Ferrari, and he told me he was actually in a similar situation to me, that he got called up last minute, and he knows what it's like, and he offered me a bit of help too. But honestly, my focus, I just wanted to get through lap one, have a clean start, which isn't easy in F1. It's very tight, and lap one is where you make the difference, so everyone's pretty aggressive. I wanted to just get through there, and I knew that once I got into the race and found some rhythm, that I would be fine. Of course, there is a risk with the walls and everything, but I knew that the more laps I did, the better I would be, and I think I showed that. At the end, I was the fastest I was in the entire race. I just kept building it up.
So you're sitting on the grid, 11th place, in Jeddah as a Ferrari Formula One driver. What's going through your mind at that moment when you're waiting for the lights to go out?
My first, because prior to the race start, I think I'd done about 3 practice starts. And the start procedure in F1 is quite specific, and it's tailored to each driver. And yeah, I remember before the race I was practicing a few of them in the car, and
so
I was so
explain
inconsistent.
How involved it is then. So you pull up onto the grid. What do you then have to do in the cockpit to prepare that car for?
So you have to, first of all, on the way to the grid, you have to do some burnouts to get the tyres into a specific window, which the team advises you on. But then you have to change a few modes, maybe perform a bite point find on the clutch. So it's a few procedures which are quite simple in the end, but in the heat of the moment, the first time doing it in real life, it was quite stressful. But the difficult thing is that you have to manage the clutch with your hand. It's a hand clutch, and you have to manage the position yourself, and also the throttle at the same time. And just getting that clutch drop correct and consistent is what you need to do. And that's something I couldn't do before the race. I was practicing this clutch drop, which is something that, like I said, is specific to each driver. And I just couldn't get it the same. I was, my spread of clutch drop was between 20 and 60%. I was, it wasn't very consistent.
What's the impact of getting that wrong?
And 60% you don't really jump off the line and you get a slow start, and 20% you go into anti-stall and you don't get off the line at all. So yeah, there's a sweet spot, and I couldn't seem to find it. So I was literally just hoping that I could get that car off the line, and it wasn't a given. So when I dropped the clutch and the car moved at a decent speed relative to the others, I let out a little victory relief, and then I could get on with the race.
Brilliant.
That was my most nervous moment, honestly, getting off the line, because it's just so involved and so different to what I'm used to in F2. So yeah, once I did it, I was like, okay, anything can happen now, but I'm happy.
I love that story. But then, of course, along comes the physicality of a Formula One race. And there will be people listening to this, and I was once in this camp where I thought, well, driving a Formula One car is a bit like going to the shops in my Ford Focus or whatever, but just a little bit quicker. Would you mind for people explaining the physical demands on the body of doing what you did in Jeddah?
I think that there's a lot of aspects. The first is the heat. In a track in a country like Saudi, it was like 30 degrees at night, and you're wearing 2 or 3 layers of fireproof clothing. You're strapped into a car with an engine behind you, with radiators on the side, with electronics boxes inside. And, it can be 55 degrees inside that cockpit. And you don't get a whole great deal of fresh air. So it's pretty hot, first of all. And it does get difficult to remain focused and correct through the whole race. It's by far the longest race I've ever done. I'm used to doing 50 minutes, 1 hour races, and this one was almost an hour and 45 minutes. So, it's getting up to double the race length that I'm used to. And I do remember at some points, looking at the lap count, and there was still 25 laps to go. And I was thinking, oh my goodness, am I going to make it to the end? Because, yeah, like I said, the heat aspect, but I mean, my neck was destroyed, completely destroyed. Like I said, I knew after free practice that it was going to be a long race. And it's just the capacity of the car, the downforce, the capacity of what it can do in braking in high-speed corners is impressive. It really rearranges your stomach. It's something quite crazy, and especially in Jeddah, with the amount of grip there and the amount of high-speed corners. And even the straights, they curve slightly, and it doesn't seem like much, but after 30 laps of doing it, even those little corners, you're still tensing your neck. There's no rest. So I still need to get to work on that, the neck aspect.
You'll be ready. There was a lovely moment as well where you had a couple of British drivers behind you, Lando Norris and Lewis Hamilton. I wondered how that moment would have been for you. I mean, being chased down by those two is special, but I guess Lewis Hamilton is a hero of yours, right?
Yeah, I was growing up in the era when he was with McLaren, 2011, 12, 13. That's when I remember him, the beautiful chrome McLaren.
What a car, by the way.
It's the most
sounded amazing, looks amazing.
Great era, and really beautiful car. And him and Jensen were the home heroes, and I was great supporters of both of them. I remember actually going to Silverstone, I think it was either 2014 or 15, when it rained at the end, and I'm pretty sure Lewis won, and that was my first experience of watching a race in real life. But anyway, being on track with them, first of all, was quite an honor. It happened that, there was about 20 laps to go, and I knew that they both pitted onto softs. And when I saw, I was looking at the screen and watching the television as I was driving. And
yeah, you might need to just explain that for people. So you're driving a Formula One car at speeds of up to 190?
Something like that.
And you're also taking the time to look at the big screens that are around the circuit for the spectators.
Yeah, I find them really useful because sometimes they're angled in a way that you can see, and you can see the gaps to the cars in front, but also you can see what's going on. And as I was going down the main straight one lap, I could see the cameras were pointed on Lando and Lewis in the pit lane, so I knew they were boxing, and I knew that they would come out on a soft tyre. And yeah, then I got the info from my engineer. I could see that they were 10 or so seconds behind me. At that stage, I almost I let them have it. I knew that they were going to come past me, on a new soft, and they were quite a bit quicker. But it just so happened that with 10 or so laps to go, the gap was dropping by about a second a lap, and then it got to about stalemate with 5 or so seconds between us. And with 5 laps to go, I realized actually I could stay in front of these two. So I started pushing on and on, and yeah. When the flag came, the gap was still the same. So that was quite a proud moment.
So nice. Did Lewis have some words for you afterwards?
Yeah, I mean, he was the first one to see me after the race. He, shook my hand and congratulated me. And of course, that was a very special moment, having watched this guy who's been racing in F1 since I was born, and to finally share the track with him. Actually, I received a video message from him in 2016. I just won the British Karting Championship, and I think through a friend he'd sent me a message and said congratulations, and keep pushing and stuff like this. And I only received that. I only re-received that recently, but it just shows that I was looking up to these guys, and now one day in the future I will share the track with them. It's an honor.
Look, that gave me goosebumps. That 8 years after you get a video message from Lewis when you're in karting, you're on the same track as him.
Yeah.
And keeping him behind you.
Yeah, that was an added bonus for sure.
So you told the world's media you were destroyed at the end of the race. I'd love to know about the pride that you felt. When did you take a moment to really work out what had happened to you? To really process what you'd been through over those 48 hours where you didn't have time to stop and take a breath?
I didn't feel much emotion. I was, it's a bit hard, but after the race, I just finished P7, but my teammate was on the podium, and I knew that the car was good for much more. So I wasn't super pleased. Of course, I was happy that I finished the race with no incident, but I knew that I could have done a bit better with a better qualifying, etc., etc. But then I saw my father, and that puts it into perspective. I saw the emotion in his eyes. This has been a journey that we've been on together since the beginning. I remember the early days when we would wake up at 5, 6 a.m. and go to Rye House. Those freezing cold winter months when I would come in crying because my hands were so cold, and just all those moments come flashing back. And that was when I really appreciated the gravity of the situation. Another moment was after the race. We'd done all the debrief and everything. By the time we'd finished, it was gone midnight. And I got back to the hotel, which was the F2 hotel that, I was staying in. I was an F2 driver that weekend. And my engineer in F2, Carlo, had stayed up and waited for me. And we met in the lobby. And even the whole of the Prema team, actually. And yeah, just the hug he gave me, that really brought a tear to my eye. It was great to see his support, because he's been in this journey for a long time as well. So it's very special to share these memories with people.
I think that's a really important aspect, is remembering all of the sacrifice of other people, not just your own.
It's such a team game. You see Vasseur going into Maranello and seeing the hard work that goes in behind the scenes, and coming back after the race, seeing the joy on people's faces, and knowing that I gave them someone to cheer for, because I think I had a lot of fans that day. But like you said, I've been sharing this journey with my family. There's been so many sacrifices we've had to make to get here, and yeah, seeing my father. Unfortunately, my mum couldn't make it, but I'm sure she was quite happy as well. But even in the background, there's so many people that have helped me along the way, from day one in karting. The guy who was coaching me in the beginning, to my mechanic in cadet karting. I mean, I couldn't count how many people have helped me get here, and it's a satisfaction for me that I've been with them, and we've kind of achieved this together, because it's it's not just for me. It's for everyone that I've ever worked with and will continue to work with, because it's such a team game.
Tell us about the role that your dad played.
My dad, first of all, has been probably one of my biggest inspirations in life. He's built his own business and he's been doing his own journey. And I think I can draw a lot of parallels between business and racing. And his work ethic, his hunger, his drive is something that's really rubbed off on me. And I think that's stood me in good stead, not only for life, but also for motorsport. And, seeing how hard he's had to work to make this a reality. It's such a difficult sport to get to the top. Outside of F1, there's so much finance required, a lot of long hours and stuff that my dad has had to work. And yeah, it all made it worth it, seeing him after the race and seeing how much it meant to him, because it was also his dream. As a kid, he had a go-kart. He had dreams of making it to F1, and for whatever reason, financially it wasn't possible. So the fact that he was able to live the dream through me, it's very proud.
And when
it makes me happy.
Think back to the advice your dad's given you. I wonder whether it's things he's said or whether it's you viewing his behaviour that's been the most influential on your life.
I think it's his actions and his hard work. He doesn't ever stop working. It's there's no business hours for him. It's non-stop, and that's something that the commitment and the drive that he has is something that's rubbed off. In the early days when he had racing experience, and he definitely helped me in the early days when I needed it. As much as I hated to hear advice from my father, everyone does, but he really guided me through the early days. Nowadays he leaves me be, and he's more there for the experience, and hopefully he loves it as much as I do. But yeah, I think his actions and his the way he is as a person has rubbed off on me, and that's really the biggest advice he's giving me, just from being there, being a father figure, and yeah, it's that's what he's done for me.
And what did he say to you after the race?
Honestly, it was a 2-second interaction. I just hugged him, and I don't think there were any words. There weren't any words needed. You could see it on my face, on his face. 1,000 words. I had to rush off to do all of the media stuff, which is necessary after an F1 race, and just to quickly share a hug with him was all that was necessary.
And you spoke about the sacrifice that you've had to make. Tell us more about that. What have been those sacrifices? What have you missed out on?
I mean, in the early days, it's little things like missing out on time with your friends on the weekends. And, it was non-stop for me. In the beginning, in karting in the UK, we were doing 40, 45 race weekends a year. That's not a lot of downtime. So it was a lot of late nights getting back from Scotland, from Cumbria. There were very long trips for us to do, and I would be heading into school the next day on very low sleep. And these are little sacrifices, because 3 or 4 years ago when I started to race abroad, I left my home, I left my family, I left my friends, and I pretty much started fresh. And then I moved to Italy with Ferrari and started fresh again. And in the beginning, it was really difficult. I had no one out there. I had all of my friends, all of my family back in the UK. I missed them very much, and at times I was questioning how much I wanted this. How much sacrifice is necessary. Am I prepared to keep doing this? Because it was really difficult. But at the end, it's all worth it, and I wouldn't change a thing.
Yeah. People often talk about this. There's a moment of loneliness where you've had to make all the sacrifices, right? You've had to do the things that nobody else has done, but there's also not the rewards yet. So you don't have all the trappings of success because you haven't got that far, but you've had to make the sacrifice to try and get there.
Exactly. There's no, at some stages there wasn't any light at the end of the tunnel, and that's difficult to stay motivated and driven when you don't really see an end goal. And I remember some points where, loneliness is a real thing in top level sport. we have such busy schedules that, you know, people can't be with us all the time, and I haven't seen my friends from the UK from school for years. But, you know, now the light is there at the end of the tunnel. It's much easier. And I thank my younger self for sticking with it.
And I'm not sure that changes, by the way. You know, I was with Lando Norris the other day and I said, how is life aside from doing brilliantly in Formula One? And you know what he said?
What?
Lonely. So even at the level he's at now, there is this element of loneliness because of everything else you have to stop doing to be successful in your chosen sport. So I guess the question is, what kept you going? You know, take us to one of those days when it felt a bit dark, when it was a bit difficult, when you were questioning things. What kept you going?
I think the drive and passion for the sport, it's the easy answer. But sometimes you even lose that. And I remember at points where I wasn't loving what I was doing. And that's a really difficult feeling.
When was this?
This was, you know, coming at some stage at the start of F2 last year. I was having a bit of a tough time of it. Nothing seemed to go to plan, and the results weren't coming, and you know, the hard work was there, but nothing was panning out. Lots of long days on the simulator and stuff like this, and it just seemed pretty non-stop. And I think I kind of, at times, I refound my passion for racing by doing things like karting. I remember one karting day I did at the start of last year, and it reminded me why I started and why I fell in love with this thing in the first place. And that kind of reignited a great passion, and I don't think I'll ever lose it again. Because, yeah, it's in any dark time, I'm reminded of why I started. And you know, now I have F1 on the horizon. I'm just super excited.
I think the ability to push through those difficult times is such an important part of getting to those moments of success. Are you talking about self-doubt? Because I think the challenge that you have in your world is it's all about a stopwatch, right? The stopwatch does not lie.
There's no hiding behind it. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there have been moments when I've doubted myself, like I said at the start of F2 last year, because honestly, there were 4 or 5 races, which, you know, is 2 or 3 months of no results, and relentless hard work with nothing to show for it, and that's really painful. I feel like the self-doubt goes away when the results come, because you're always questioning whether you're good enough, whether you have what it takes, and just by proving it once, you kind of lose that. I remember a turning point in F2 last year was when I won both races in Baku. I clean sweep the entire weekend, and you know, my self-confidence was never an issue after that in F2. Then I got to F1, you know, to do my free practices, and before my first ever one in Mexico, you naturally ask yourself, do I have what it takes to be with these guys? Because it's one thing performing at the top of F2, but do I have what it takes to perform in this level? And I think I even had that before Jeddah, naturally. And yeah, once you do a performance that counts, I think those question marks start to go away. And I fully expect that it will come back for the first round in Australia next year. But, you know, there's been a few occasions where I've had it, so hopefully I'll deal with it a bit better.
And what advice would you give to people for whom self-doubt or imposter syndrome, we sometimes refer to it as, for whom it's actually pretty crippling? Like, what are the processes that you go through?
I look back at you know, performances that I've managed to achieve in the past, because, you know, in this sport you don't really lose it. I feel like with every lap I turn, I gain experience, and I gain not talent, but, you know, I'm more of a full package, and I represent myself in a better way. So, you know, whenever I have those moments of doubt, I look back at specific performances that I've done. Jeddah is an example, Baku last year is an example, and you know, I did it, and I have what it takes. I just need to perform at the level which I can, and it's about extracting that from yourself, because that's sometimes what I struggle with, getting the best out of myself and performing. because on my day I feel like I can fight with anyone, but I just need to have my day a bit more often. But I'm not worried. That comes with experience.
Yeah. And what advice would you give people on how to deal with failure? Because if there's one thing that Formula One drivers or any racing driver has to do, it's they have to get used to making mistakes that cost a lot of money, and sometimes an entire team's week of work or month of work can be gone in the blink of an eye.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really had to deal with it yet, because Formula One is a whole new world in terms of that. Like I said, the eyes are on you a lot more than F2, and in F2, it's kind of a proving ground. You're free almost to make mistakes and learn by making mistakes. But also, I'm not too scared to go into F1 and be inch perfect, because, you know, I'm young, I'm a rookie, I need to find the limit and make mistakes. And that's not to say I want to go out and crash the car, but you need to be successful. You need to, you know, it's a game of trial and error. So I don't have a fear of failure, because, you know, I think it's the best way of learning. But, you know, I think the important thing is that you learn from your mistakes and that you don't repeat them. That's the main goal and the main advice.
And how much does it play on your mind that you see other drivers that have been given so little time when it comes to Formula One? There is no place to hide. And, you know, we saw recently with Nick de Vries as a good example. He comes in, he gets very little time to prove himself, and he's taken straight back out of the car. Do you ever think about that? Does that ever play on your mind, that really you have to deliver now?
Yeah, you know, F1, it's tenfold more in terms of that. You know, you have to perform. There's such little gaps at the moment between all the cars that you can't afford to have a bad day. So yeah, that definitely is playing on my mind, and I want to extract the maximum from myself. But I believe that with the team around me, not only my personal team, but the bigger picture, Haas and Ferrari, they believe in me. They see a long-term future, and give me time to learn and adapt and get used to it. But yeah, it's always playing on my mind that it's a ruthless sport. But I just want to use every lap now. You know, I have some more free practice sessions and some more test days with Ferrari. I want to use that to be as ready as possible for the first race and make sure that I'm delivering it as well as I can, given my experience from round one next year.
So let's talk about the preparation that you can go to then to make sure that you're in the perfect place. What does hard work look like for you?
Again, there's a lot of aspects to hard work. I mean, physically is step one, and that's really the first thing on my mind, because it can't be a consideration when you're racing. Jeddah was a bit of a exception because of the circumstances, but I don't want to be turning up next year and, you know, have doubts if I'm going to hold on with my neck or something like this, because that's energy taken away from focusing on the race and your preparation, and it's put somewhere, you know, it's wasted. So I need to be ready for that, and now I know that it's confirmed. I've got 8 months to make sure that I'm fully prepared. So I've recently got into cycling, and that's something that I'm pushing a lot on to increase my fitness level generally. But yeah, the neck training will go up tenfold before Australia. Then in the background, I'm working hard on the simulator, because unlike tennis, unlike football, we can't practice on the racetrack every day, or the court, let's say. So, you know, that's the closest we can get to getting ready. And, you know, with the simulator comes gained technical knowledge. That's something that I definitely need to work on, because from F2 to F1, the complexity of the car is much, much higher, and something that you really need to be ready to work on, because you need to lead the team in the right direction, and you need to make the correct decisions on the setup. And, you know, you need to know what the car is comprised of before you do that. So, you know, a lot of simulator work and a lot of lessons, hopefully, with the engineers within Haas and Ferrari, to make sure that when race one comes, I know everything there is to know about the car. I know it inside out. I think it will just help me be in a better frame of mind, less obstructed mentally.
Yeah.
So yeah, then I have no excuse not to perform.
It reminds me, you know, of speaking to Jenson Button when I was involved in Formula One, you know, 15 odd years ago, and he was intense about his physical fitness. And I remember saying to him, why is it so important to you? And he said a similar thing to what you've just said. He said, look, loads of stuff can go wrong in a Formula One race, right? Whether it's another driver doing something that I wasn't expecting, whether the car gives up on me. But there's one area where I know I can be the best. And that's when it comes to physical fitness. So when I'm sitting on the grid at the start of a Grand Prix, one thing I don't need to fear is anyone else fitter than me here? Because the truth is, when you get physically tired, it makes you mentally tired. Well, you can't be mentally tired as a Formula One driver because that mistake...
It's not an option.
It can cost a life. It can, it's a serious thing, right? You can't be making mistakes through exhaustion in that car. So I think that's probably a really smart mindset. If you're the fittest guy, that fear is gone, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it will take a while to become the fittest guy.
Come on, it can happen. You've got 8 months, you're 19 years old. This is fine. You're not 45 like me,
But yeah, those guys work hard. And yeah, that's definitely something that I don't want to be a consideration at all. I want to focus fully on the racing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it will require a lot of hard work. And, my main goal this year is still F2. I really want to finish on a high with my team Prema because it's the 3rd year that we've been working together, and they ultimately provided me with the jump to get to F1. So I really want to finish on a high with them and start increasing the workload in the background of getting towards F1.
So you can work on your physical fitness, and I think a lot of people understand that. What about the work on your mental strength? What are your plans there?
Yeah, I mean, the mental game in F1 is much higher. Like I said, you can't have a day off, which, maybe you're afforded a day off a bit more often in Formula 2. So that's something I need to come to terms with and get working on. I think, I need to call upon people who have experience in F1, not only drivers, but, staff, people who've worked in the sport and understand a bit more about what goes on, because personally I'm not too well versed in that as of yet. So that's something that it's a work in progress, but I need to work on because the mental game is something that's just as important as the physical side of things in our sport.
And do you have a psychologist or a sports psychologist or a therapist or anyone that you work with to sort out the mental side?
I have a mental coach. His name's Enzo, and we've been working together for a very long time as well. He's also worked with and continues to do so with Liam Lawson. So it's great because Liam was always one step above me, and even he made his F1 debut before me, so he could help me a bit with the extra challenges, even when I jumped to F3 and F2 and eventually F1 as well. So he helped me, and it's more someone that I can confide in, someone that I can tell all my problems and bring the weight off of my shoulders, not onto his, but sharing a problem is always helpful for me. And I feel like my whole team in general, my father, my manager, and Enzo, they are people that I can share my problems with, and they help me to stay grounded and stay relaxed, and it does help me mentally.
Yeah, I'd love to know from you, I think it'd be really helpful for our audience actually, the most valuable things you've learned from Enzo, the bits of advice he might have given you over the years you've worked together, the things he's said.
Enzo is more helpful for me specifically to the racing side. Yeah. I mean, he doesn't coach me on driving anymore. In the beginning, it was like that. But I think it's just because I found myself at times, especially in Formula 3, I was still young and I mean, I am still young, but I was mentally young, let's say. And I found myself getting worked up by things, and it would really cloud my judgment. And this is something that's not an option. If someone would overtake me or I would make a mistake, I would, tumble into a stream of mistakes or make a bad move that was never an option. But I was just doing out of desperation almost. And that's something that I've come to terms with. And I think it's a reason that I'm performing quite well. I feel like this year it's been my best so far in terms of personal performance. Maybe not in terms of overall results, because F2 has been a bit tough. But I've picked my battles, and that's something that I have, it's been a bit of a weakness of mine. I remember in Imola in F3, it was my second race. I was leading until the last lap, and someone tried to go around the outside of me. The move was, I tried to defend it, but the move from my side was never on. But out of desperation, I went for it. We made contact, I got a penalty, and I fell back down the order. And this is something that I wouldn't even consider nowadays. And that is something that Enzo's helped me to grow as a person and try and think of the bigger picture, which is not easy in the heat of the moment. You know, you have a split second to make that decision, and it kind of comes back to the first question: what high performance is. And you know, in the early days, I was just going for it all out, no matter what. And you know, that can bring a few good points and a few victories and stuff, but it doesn't bring a champion. I think what brings a champion is performing consistently well on all the days, and that's all about picking your battles.
Love that. There's also a great value there in people hearing you say, basically, you failed, right? You know, you went for something that shouldn't have happened.
I failed more often than not, honestly. It's been, you know, especially, I mean, even now, you know, I do make mistakes more often than I would like to, but I think I take pride in the fact that I'm not scared of doing these mistakes, because I know that once I make a mistake, I'm not going to redo it. And that's something that I think has helped me to develop quickly as a driver and move up through the ranks pretty quickly. And, you know, hopefully I can find a stable ground in F1 and build up experience, because I've never spent more than 2 years in the same category, which is tough, you know, because you're always finding out new things and always moving up. So hopefully in F1 I can find some stable ground and build my experience. That's my goal.
And this takes a bit of vulnerability to answer really honestly, right? Do you take time to enjoy what's going on? Because I've spoken to so many former sports people who say, I never took the opportunity to enjoy it because I was just so focused on being victorious. You know, we've spoken about that amazing opportunity that you're in a Ferrari, but then immediately your brain is about, I need to deliver. Then your first ever qualifying session in Formula One, but you were disappointed with the way you finished. And then your first ever incredible race, the whole world is lauding you, and you're just disappointed that Charles Leclerc was so much further up the track than you were. Like, where was the joy?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great question. You know, I think I should enjoy a bit more, and people do always tell me to do so. And you know, my manager especially, he was, you know, performing at a really high level in tennis, and that's one thing he does tell me. But when you're focused and driven and hungry to make it to the top, I don't think it's in your nature to enjoy. And it's actually funnily enough, it's a phrase that I have with my engineer. I have it actually in my chassis, a little sticker that just reminds me to enjoy, because it's a process. You know, it's my passion and it's what I love. But I don't take enough time to enjoy it, and that's something that I've really touched on this year. Funnily enough, it's the last thing I say with my engineer before I get in the car. Remember to enjoy it. And like I said, it's printed there inside my car, so I can see it as I'm driving around.
Okay, so be totally honest with me. It's the last thing you say to your engineer, enjoy it. You've got a sticker inside the car telling you to enjoy it.
I don't enjoy it, no. I'm fully focused on delivering. But, you know, just having the phrase in the mind can help a little bit. But no, I wouldn't say enjoying is something that I do enough. It's something that I should probably work on.
You see, I've operated at a very different level to you, right? You know, driving cars as you do is up here, presenting TV programs, and what I've done is most definitely not at that level. But I didn't enjoy really any of it, because when I got my job on kids TV, right, my job was all about, there were 1 year contracts constantly. Can I keep getting a 1 year contract? Can I be the person that moves on from kids TV? So there's no enjoyment, because it's like I need to deliver. And then when I got the Formula One job, I was 28. That's old to you, right? I understand. But that was young to get that job. And again, I had a 1 year contract. And my boss said to me, everyone will make their minds up about you as a TV presenter on F1 in 10 seconds.
Yeah.
So there was no opportunity to enjoy it, because the pressure was just too much. And then I felt that the whole time I did that job. So when I did F1, everyone went out, parties, nights out, drinking sessions, hangovers. Not for me. In the hotel room, 7 o'clock every night, just because I wanted to be the best I could be. Then the same happened with my job as a football presenter. You know, I got that and I had to deliver. I think now is the first time in my life I feel free, and I love doing this high performance, and I'm really taking time to enjoy it. But I'm now 45. And if I'm being totally honest, I don't think I would have been here today if I had spent my time enjoying what I was doing. And I saw loads of people, same job as me, spending loads of time enjoying it.
Exactly.
But within about 2 years, they were no longer doing that job because they were enjoying it too much. So I think it's a really worthwhile conversation because I think some people don't quite get it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's a trade-off, right? Because you also need to find a source of happiness, and maybe it can help you to be motivated. And of course, I enjoy driving. That's not in question. It's the reason I'm still here is because I love it. It's, you know, the thing that brings you back every time. The thing that wakes me up in the morning is because I love what I do. But you know, it's not all fun and games. It's a full-time job. It's always playing on my mind. It's never. I mean, my life is revolving around racing. So, yeah, it's enjoying in a different sense of the word.
I get exactly what you mean. What about ambition? Where does that sit with you? Do you set yourself targets, goals, and then set out to achieve them? Are you more process-driven?
I try to enjoy the process because I think setting goals, whether it be for a championship position or for specific, results-based, it's quite difficult because you never know where you stand in terms of performance within the cars, and stuff like this. I try to look at the personal side when I look at ambition, and it's not really something that you can count. You can't really put it on a piece of paper, but I look at my personal performance, and you know whether you're happy with it or not. Yeah. No matter the result, whether you're P1 or P5 or P10, you know whether you performed at your best or not. And that's my ambition. I want to perform at my best more often than not. And it's something that I'm really happy with myself this year because I feel like I'm performing at a really high level. Even if the results are, some of the worst I've had in a long time, my personal performance has been up there, and I feel like that's something that pushes me, and that's my ambition. I would be lying to you if I said I didn't want to win a world championship. I just wanted to perform my best because, of course, I want to be a world champion, but I want to perform at what I'm capable of performing at, and that's my ambition.
And if you were to write it down, what is the ultimate for you?
The ultimate for me is to have a long career in racing, in F1. I want to race for Ferrari, of course. They've trusted me, and they've put a lot into me over the years, and it's every boy's dream to race in red, and I would love to do that one day. And just getting my foot in the door in Jeddah, that cemented that ambition even more. And yeah, I really do hope that one day I can win races for Ferrari. That's my ultimate dream. But aside from that, I want to continue doing what I love. I want to do this for as long as possible. I look at people like Lewis and Fernando racing into their 40s, and this is something that I hope to do one day. You need the talent and ability to get there, but I really hope that I can do so.
And for people who are excited about you racing in Formula One for Haas next season, what would you like to tell them about your feelings about that season? What do you want out of that season?
It's my rookie season, and it's my third rookie season in 4 years. So I've got quite a lot of experience with those. It will be my third in 4 years. I just want to be proud of my performances, and it's always what I've said. And it's not results based. It's not It's not based on performance because it's not only me that determines the performance. So I just want to perform at a high level, be proud of what I've done, focus on the process and build up step by step, and look back and say, this is the guy that can win a race eventually. This is a guy that is performing at the level that he should. And if I perform at the level I should, that's all I can do, right? I can only perform to what I can. But I have the belief in myself that I can perform at a very high level. So I just want to do that.
Great. And finally, before our quick fire questions, at the end of your career, how would you like people to talk about you?
I don't mind, honestly. It's a tough question, because of course you want to be liked by the media, by your fans and everyone, but I'm purely doing this for my own enjoyment, how much I love racing, and that's what drives me. I want everyone to be a huge fan of me, but you can't be. That's difficult. So yeah, I don't mind how I go down in history or whatever. We're still very early days, so let's see. But I just want to enjoy it.
Good luck on that journey.
And get there.
Amazing. Right, let's do some quickfire questions. What are the 3 most important behaviours that matter to you and that you think have got you to where you are today?
I think discipline is the first one. Discipline is something that I have missed a bit in the past and something that I've really worked on, and it's something that really counts not only on track but also off track. Your time management, your how hard you work away from the track as well. These are things that all come down to discipline, and it's something that I continue to work on. I think being a genuine person is a really important behavior to have. You need to know where you stand, and that's something that I found in a lot of people that I work with. They won't beat around the bush. They won't please me they won't say the correct things. They'll say how it is. And that's really important to me because in a sport like this, you need to know exactly where you stand. And that's why I really love the group of people I have.
And the last one?
The last one. I think you have to be really driven to get along with me because I feel like I'm like that myself. And if I don't, if I see someone without aspirations, then it's tough to push with them. And that's something I find with my team in Prema, how hard they want, how much they want this. You really see the passion and it helps everyone mutually. It drives everyone forward. I feel like that's a really important behavior.
Nice. What's the most important piece of advice you've ever been given?
I tend to struggle a bit with overthinking. And that is something that has helped me just to go through it with Enzo, but with my previous boss, Marco, as well in Ferrari. It's a subject that we often touched upon. And I mean, if the advice is simply don't overthink, it's a bit more complex than that, but finding ways to stay focused on the goal and the process, especially in the car, because I do struggle a bit with that. And it's very racing specific, but kind of going through gates in your head, lap by lap, sector by sector, and keep focusing ahead and not thinking about anything
That's
else.
Interesting. So does having those gates when you're in the car, the next sort of achievement you want to, whether it's a lap time or
whether it's working on the next corner, or just resetting every lap, and these things I call them gates. It's like a mental reset or refresh that I try to use when I'm driving, and it keeps my mind at ease and it keeps me focused on the correct things.
And how does that stop you from overthinking?
I think it's more just that it works personally for me because I've done it for a while now, and it helps me to, it's almost like a refresh for myself. And I don't think it's, something that's going to work for everyone, but I tend to find that it works for me because, it's like, okay, I'm here, I'm at the start line, or I'm finishing sector 2, I've gone around this corner, and now I'm going to reset. I'm not going to think about anything else. I'm thinking about the next corner. What happened last lap? Do I need to push the braking point or do a better job releasing the brakes, whatever?
I think that's really good, because I think that having this idea of going through these gates, right, it means even if you mess up one of the gates, there's another gate in a few seconds' time. So it's about then making sure you deal with that.
It's just resetting every time and trying not to let what's happened in the past affect your future. It's the windscreen wiper, trying to get the stuff off of it as quick as possible and clean the windscreen. That's what I try and focus on.
What's your biggest strength? What's your greatest weakness?
My biggest strength, I think I'm a quick learner. I feel like that's put me in good stead for life, and part of the reason that I got up to speed very quickly in Jeddah, I've always been very good at getting up to speed fast. My first laps in free practice in F2 have always been up there, and it always sets the tone for the weekend. So I feel like I have, it's a bad thing to say because it's a bit, almost full of yourself, and I hate being like that, but I feel like I have a decent mental capacity that I can, take on a lot of information and still perform at a good level because, for example, this year, a lot of occasions I'm doing free practices on Friday alongside my F2 duties. And trust me, the mental difficulty of that is quite impressive. Jumping from F2 into F1 and back to F2 again. Not only the difference between driving the cars, but the time gaps between the sessions, how quickly you have to be at the next car, and even how difficult it is on Thursday to take in all of this information. You have another run plan in free practice 1, and the complexity of F1 is a whole nother level. And trying to be sharp on everything and still performing and putting the car on the front row in qualifying is really difficult. And I think, doing that week in, week out, which is something I've been doing a lot of, it's not easy, and it's, helping me to work on this strength.
And your greatest weakness?
My greatest weakness, that's a good question. I have a lot of weaknesses. I think I tend to struggle sometimes to take emotion away from things. As much as I don't show it, I'm quite an emotional person. And it's strange because I only get the ultimate highs and the ultimate lows of emotion. I'm a very stable person. I don't really get extremely happy or extremely sad. I only get extremely, extremely happy or extremely, extremely sad. So it really makes it a bit tough for me to remove emotion from my sport and my job.
So interesting you said that, because I see you as really stable, really carefully thought about, like, I don't know. I wouldn't see you as someone that's up there or down there.
Yeah, honestly, it's more often down there than it is up there. But yeah, sometimes I struggle a bit to take away some anger and emotion from it. And yeah, sometimes it can come out the wrong way, and I can push people away a little bit, and that makes professional life sometimes a bit difficult, and it's something I continue to work on.
I wonder whether that is part of the reason why you're sitting here today, though. The fact that you do get low, like, it's an important part of what makes you the guy you are.
I think if the lows weren't part of it, it means you don't care enough and you're not committed enough, right? The emotion sometimes reminds me how much I want this and how driven I am, and it does help me to not refocus, but, re-motivate to perform better.
So interesting. And look, the final question, your golden rule, if you like, for living a high performance life, what would you love to leave people thinking about?
I think it's all about your drive and motivation. And over the years, I'm very early into my career, compared to people you've spoken to, like I said at the beginning with Fernando and people like this. But I have been through a lot of highs and lows, and questioned myself sometimes and how much I really wanted this, and the fact that I did want this and the fact that I continue to push, that's my motivation, and that's what will hopefully make me succeed one day.
Good man. I've loved that conversation. And personally, as you know, my son's sitting outside listening to this. He's 8 years old, loves Formula One, loves racing. You are breaking down doors for people like him to walk through. So just remember how many people you're inspiring. And I know it isn't easy, and I know it can be lonely, and I know that the hard work is real, but it's all in front of you, and I can't wait to see the Ollie Bearman story.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I can't wait to get started, and next year for the home Grand Prix, it's going to be something really awesome. I can't wait to get going.
Top man.
Thank you, mate.